everyone, this is Callimara here, and no, it's not calamari. Welcome back to my channel, or if you want to join the pond, go ahead and take a dive. You might like it here. So the title is pretty self-explanatory. I will be redesigning the entire cast of the newest generation of My Little Pony, Generation 5. I don't often do multiple characters in one video, but when I do, it's usually a good time, even if it is a bit of extra work. In case you haven't seen it yet, I've already redesigned Sunny in my last My Little Pony video where I also talk about my critiques and opinions of Generation 5's art direction in general. So if you want to see that, go and check that video out. And for this video, I obviously went back and rewatched the G5 movie A New Generation. And I noticed some extremely heavy parallels between the main issue that was raised in that story and current humanitarian issues going on in real life. Like, just at the start of the movie, Sunny actively protests a weapons manufacturer promoting fear and segregation based on harmful stereotypes that demonizes entire groups of ponies. She calls for a ceasefire and emphasizes to Hitch how important it is that he help because so many ponies look up to him and listen to him. And to get ahead of the curve, I know some of you will probably say, oh, don't bring politics into shows and media. Let it be what it is, separate from the real world. Except G5 already is political and literally draws on issues we face in real life. And of course what I'm talking about is the genocide that is currently happening in Palestine. It's really not political, it's just basic humanity. She agrees with me. If you are subscribed to me or follow me on my Twitter or Instagram, you might know that I've promoted fundraisers for Palestine before and have been speaking out about what's been going on and retweeting a lot of news, educational resources, and charities to help the people in Gaza. But I think it's important that I speak out on my main platform as well. Currently, Palestinians are living through non-stop bombardments, losing their homes, their land, their history, and their lives. They have no access to basic needs such as food, water, electricity, and medical care due to Israeli occupation. I feel especially strongly about this both as an Indonesian, my people having been subjected to the same experience of colonialism, and as a healthcare worker, seeing how these people don't even have access to clean water or clean bandages to dress their wounds, and how my fellow doctors and nurses in Gaza were also targeted by these attacks. I highly recommend you to donate, educate yourself on what is currently happening, and use your voice. I will link some educational resources in my description, and if you're interested in donating, I also have a bunch of links to various Palestinian aid organizations that I have personally donated to myself. These organizations are currently the only lifeline that the people in Gaza have, because recently Israel has just invaded Rafah, which was the last safe place in Gaza, because not even hospitals, schools, or places of religion were safe from their attacks. Every dollar counts, but if you're not in the financial position to do that, then you can also boycott and use your voice to share and educate others. Now let's get on with the video. The first pony I will be drawing is Izzy Moonbow. As a refresher to my previous video, the art direction I'm going for in these redesigns is heavily inspired by the Generation 2 ponies, but with more modern sensibilities, particularly in the line art and eyes. I also noticed that while G5 had made progress in their cast body diversity, they actually regressed when it came to the eye shapes. As you may already know, while the cast of G4 had the exact same body types across the main 6, they actually had unique eye shapes to compensate. Yes, technically Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, and Applejack had the same oval eyes, but at least their eyelashes were unique to them. G5 actually gave them all pretty much the same eyes. I thought that was a shame, so in honor of G4, I will be giving them unique eye shapes again. One thing I was doing in my MLP redesign so far is actually drawing inspiration from real-life horses, mostly in reference to their coat patterns to give the character designs a bit more flair. And because I really like the body diversity that the G5 cast have, not only will I be drawing from real-life horse coat patterns, but I will also be using real-life horse breeds as inspiration, because they come in many different shapes and sizes. And there is no doubt in my mind that Izzy would be a Frisian horse. Frisians are classified as a light draught horse, which are those big working horses you might see pulling wagons, and is most well known for its all-black coat color, its long flowing mane and tail, feathering on its legs, a high head carriage, and high stepping action. Obviously, we won't be doing the all-black coat color because we want to keep the design recognizable to Izzy, but we will be doing other fun things for her coat later on. However, a lot of Frisians I've seen get their hair curled like this, and I thought that would be perfect for Izzy. Not to mention the feathering on their legs would also help her look more whimsical and magical when she's running across the magic forest or something. So I thought putting her in a rearing up pose would be the best way to show off her mane and tail in motion and to reflect her fun-loving and playful energy. While thinking back on it, I also realized that modern character designs tend to lean more towards straight, thin hair, whereas older character designs in kids' media tended to prefer more textured hair with a lot of curls and frills. Or at the very least, they really don't detail hair as much as they used to. For instance, Izzy here is definitely meant to have wavy hair, but aside from her 3D model, they kind of just ignore the actual texture of her hair in her 2D design in favor of a general shape implying textured hair. As a bit of a throwback, and because I just wanted her to look pretty, I'm going to detail those curls when I get to the coloring stage. But for now, I'll just be shaping the general flow of the hair first. I know I definitely wanted to make it long and flowy, just like in her 3D model, because I think it's actually a nice callback to classical unicorn designs with long, wavy manes. Though speaking of magic, I do think it's fun that they're taking more liberties with the unicorn horns to give them more unique grooves. It makes me think of how every human has a unique fingerprint, and I think it's pretty cool that every unicorn has unique horn grooves now, too. I decided not to go for the tufted tail on Izzy though, because it was pretty unpopular when I did it on my Twilight redesign, and because I think it stands to reason that after a long time without magic, the unicorns kind of became less magical than their classical counterparts back in Twilight's era, and their appearance changed slightly to reflect that. I started working on her cutie mark, and I realized that I genuinely had no idea what any of the G5's cutie marks looked like. Not even Sunny's, and especially not Hitch's. Heck, for a while after watching the movie, I was genuinely convinced that none of the G5 ponies had cutie marks, because I thought, well, I guess they did say magic disappeared, so I guess they don't have cutie marks. So imagine my surprise learning that they in fact did have cutie marks the entire time. I think a lot of that has to do with the angles they show the characters in, which is usually more front-facing than any of the previous generations, and I think they've also changed it so that the ponies only have their cutie marks on one side of their flanks, which makes it even harder to spot them. And to that I say, the people working on G5 My Little Pony clearly have no familiarity or affection for horses, because who films horses from the front? Like, that's usually when they look the dopiest and the longest in face length. But no, we're giving these horses primate faces with chins, flat noses, and forward-facing eyes. I'll just put a pin in that and we'll pick it up later. If I have to be honest, My Little Pony is no longer my horse girl media of choice, but if you're looking for recommendations, I highly suggest you check out Unicorn Academy instead. It is the best piece of horse girl media I've watched in a long time. The horses actually look like horses and their designs are freaking amazing and remind me a lot of the Horseland horses, but they have magic. And while they don't talk, I actually prefer it that way because it really helps sell the fantasy of owning a pet unicorn more, and I just find talking animal companions annoying as a general rule. The show aesthetic itself reminds me a lot of the original Winx Club before all the reboots, especially the academy itself and the dormitories. It just screams Althea to me. And the writing is genuinely super good. I really love Sophia, and honestly, I could make an entire video just about Unicorn Academy, and I probably will. So yeah, if you haven't seen Unicorn Academy yet, it is available on Netflix, or for free, if you're creative enough, you know what I'm saying? But I would definitely recommend this show any day over G5 My Little Pony. Anyway, now that we've put down Izzy's base colors, finally we get to texturize her mane. To do this, I'm pulling individual lines of color over the base to detail individual strands and make the mane more majestic. The way I like to do hair on ponies or otherwise is to create a lot of imperfections and flyaways, because obviously hair isn't going to stay perfectly in place at all times unless it's in a braid or a protective hairstyle. But even then, I think adding stray strands just make the piece look more interesting and fun. But that's me personally. I know some people do things differently and create hair in strong shapes and blocks, and I think those look great too, so it just depends on your style. And for this design of Izzy, I wanted to create the look of long, loose curls just flowing in the wind. And for the coat, obviously I'm going to give her some marks as well to make her look extra fun. The pattern I'm giving Izzy is actually something you'd find on an Appaloosa, and the term for it is a snowflake coat because it looks like the horse had just gotten snowed on with snowflakes caught in its fur, and it lends well to the sparkles and glitter I've decided to sprinkle across her mane to make her look extra magical. Next up, we have Hitch. Now, design-wise, his was probably the only one I really had a bone to pick with. Looking at him, it really feels like the corporate overlords at Hasbro went, "So this time we want to make a boy pony, and boys have short hair, so our first boy pony main protagonist has to have short hair." I don't know, he just looks very basic, and I know this isn't the first time they've done short hair for boy ponies before. I just think it really doesn't translate as well in the new art style, especially in 3D, because with the angles they keep using to show him, it looks like his hair is coming purely from the top of his head, which only serves to make him look more human. And yes, this is also a problem I have with the little foals they show running around Maritime Bay all the time as well. And if anything, his main design betrays a lot of his characterization in the movie, because that's the only point of reference I have, and I do believe that's the only point of reference I need, at least until the consensus comes out on Make Your Mark. Anyway, in case you don't know anything about Hitch, he is the sheriff of Maritime Bay and is portrayed to be quite the stud, perhaps the most popular bachelor in the whole town. We see a couple of mares giggling at him as they pass by, and even Sprout Cloverleaf remarks about his good looks several times throughout the movie. And yet, to us, the audience, Hitch doesn't look all that different from Sprout himself. They literally have the same mane style, yet Sprout goes out of his way to remark on how luscious and luxurious Hitch's mane is. So let's actually give him that, shall we? Because honestly, of all the male anthropomorphic character designs to have long hair, I feel like a horse would be the most socially acceptable. Because just look at real-life stallions. They're absolutely stunning with their long flowing mane. While I don't want to go overboard and give him the same mane Izzy has, I do think some length would really do him some good. Obviously, my main inspiration for Hitch is the legendary animated horse himself, Spirit, who was also considered widely in his movie to be a gorgeous stud, and if I had it my way, Hitch would also be a buckskin Mustang. At this point, I've brought up Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron in every single one of my MLP redesign videos, so who am I to break that pattern? And guess what? This is my video, so I will be making Hitch a buckskin Mustang. Or as close as I could get to one with his current coloration, I guess. But unlike the more officially recognized horse breeds like the Frisian, which have strict breed characteristics, Mustangs are a lot more flexible because, fun fact, it is not actually an official horse breed, but rather a population of free-roaming feral horses that live in western USA. Mustangs originally descended from Iberian horses that were first brought to North America by Spanish conquistadors, which themselves were not just one specific breed, but rather a population of horses native to the Iberian Peninsula. So really, they could look like anything. Which means hypothetically, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could say Hitch is a Mustang already. The one thing I for sure wanted to capture was his dashing and proud bearing. Hitch is very confident and aware of his good looks, so I wanted to capture that in his pose, like he's deliberately posing, showing off his best angle, knowing that he's a pretty boy. Don't get too attached to the way his hair is styled here though, because I end up changing my mind and restyling it for the final design, but I really wish I had kept it because it helped balance out this pose really well. However, the con is that it doesn't really illustrate the main style I intended for him as well as the style I did end up settling with, which you'll see me do later on. See, one of my favorite boy pony designs in the MLP franchise is undoubtedly Brayburn because I really like what they did with his mane. He's still got some length to it, but it's not too long, and it looks really bouncy and fluffy, which I think would serve Hitch much better than his current mane. Honestly, they're missing out on a lot of glamorous mane flipping action here by giving Hitch the mane that they did. I think it would have been a funny and more interesting way of hammering home the point that Hitch is good looking, as opposed to having other characters, mostly Sprout, constantly telling us that. Or maybe it's just the male affirmation thing where only gym bros compliment each other on their gains. I'm starting to think that Hitch was probably designed by and for the male gaze, but that ended up making him look unfortunately human, just like Sunny's dad. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Here is Hitch's final look. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Oh my god, I never even referred to him as his full legal name, Hitch Trailblazer. Goes to show how much mental capacity he takes up in my head. But anyway, next up we have Princess Zephyrina Storm, aka Zipp Storm. Listen, I don't think she looks that bad. Okay, let's do a compliment sandwich. I genuinely love her color scheme and the colors of her feathers. She has one of the most beautiful Pegasus wings in all of the My Little Pony franchise, and I'm absolutely in love with it. However, I think they really did her dirty by concentrating so much of her hair on top of her head and forelock, and not enough hair on the length of her neck like a typical horse. It makes her mane look unevenly distributed, and I think it results in the same problem as other short-maned ponies in G5. They end up looking too human. The potential is there, I think she just needs a little help. For the Royal Pegasus sisters, I wanted to base them off of Arabian horses because, first of all, I love Arabians, they're my favorite horse breed and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. These horses are easily identifiable by their distinct head shape and high tail carriage, which is what I'm incorporating here in Zipp's design. I think the high tail carriage also makes her silhouette look more like a thunderbolt, which I was very pleased about. For her mane, I kept her windswept forelocks the way they are, but I'll be balancing it by giving more volume in her mane. It's actually pretty common for horses to have these buzz cuts. I'm not really sure what the proper term is, particularly for military horses or fjord horses, which you may recognize from Frozen. For her eyes, I wanted to do a sharper shape to reflect her more refined and steadfast personality. She definitely looks like she means business, and I love that she is portrayed as both elegant and regal, but also tough and active and kind of tomboyish. Just based on her personality, I think she would have been my favorite G5 pony if they'd done her mane better. Like, just giving it more volume so that it's visible when she's somewhat front-facing really would have helped. In fact, it's not even a particularly new style for My Little Pony either, seeing that they used an identical cut for Tempest Shadow in the G4 movie. And yet, between the two of them, which one do you think looks more visually compelling? Or at the very least, which one looks like they actually have a mane? But I guess it's unfair to compare Zipp to what is objectively one of the best My Little Pony character designs. But yeah, hopefully now she looks less like an Olympic torch. When I designed her wings, I tried to emulate the style I used for Sunny's alicorn wings to make sure they looked coherent with each other, while still giving it some personal touches for Zipp. Her shape philosophy to me, just based on her cutie mark and name alone, gives off a very sharp, angular feel, so I wanted to bring those same sharp, sleek shapes to her wings as well. And did you know that Arabian horses are still considered horses, even though technically they don't make the cutoff size of 14.2 hands or something like that? I'm pulling these figures off the top of my head, but apparently Arabian horses are about the same size as like ponies, and they should be classified as ponies, but the horse association decided they are horses regardless if they make that cutoff size between pony and horse. Which brings me to my second point. Their dainty and small stature would be well suited for a flighted horse that spends more time up in the air, because Arabian horses dominate the discipline of endurance riding and are used in many fields of equestrian sport, which is mostly what Pegasi are known for in My Little Pony lore, being the athletes and Olympians and warrior tribes of ponies back in the day. In fact, Arabian horses are used to improve other breeds by adding speed, refinement, endurance, and strong bones. It took a while for me to decide how I wanted to position the other wing because this pose is pretty different from any horse pose I've ever done so far, but I do think it's very dynamic and fun, and it suits Zipp's character as a Pegasus who's very active and always on the go. I do manage to figure it out in the end though, and then I finally move on to her cutie mark, which I must say is probably my favorite out of the G5 marks, even though it's arguably just a recolor of Rainbow Dash's cutie mark, but with a crown instead of a cloud. Maybe that's why I like it. I also realized that the cutie marks are subtly becoming less of a focus in G5 than they used to be in all the previous generations. And once again, it has a lot to do with the posing and how the characters are angled towards the camera. Apart from the bright pastel rainbow colors, cutie marks were arguably the thing that set My Little Pony dolls apart from other horse dolls on the market, of which there were plenty. Each pony had a unique cutie mark and color and name, and so there was incentive there to collect them. And this collection aspect was arguably more prominent in earlier generation ponies because up until G4, none of the shows were story-driven. It was just about showing a bunch of pretty ponies with different designs and cute names, then selling toys of them for people to buy their kids and or collect for archival purposes. So where I feel that G5 has kind of strayed from this is that they are posing the characters in ways that place less focus and attention to the cutie marks and more to the characters' faces, even though objectively, there's even less interesting things going on in their faces, like unique eye shapes or particularly pretty eyes, than there was in G4, which still posed characters in a way that their cutie marks were always clearly visible. It's branding, you guys. The cutie marks are the ponies' logos, and you want the audience to remember those logos because that's how you sell more toys and merch with those logos on the merch. And speaking of branding, I've also noticed that the characters in G5 don't really refer to each other by their full names like they did in Generation 4 and previous generations. They all just kind of call each other by their first names, so when I first saw the movie, I didn't know Sunny's full name was Sunny Star Scout. I thought her name was just Sunny. And likewise, I also didn't think Hitch had a full name. Let's take G4 for example. The characters would often refer to each other by their full names even if they knew each other. Like, Rarity would still call Rainbow Dash Rainbow Dash. Sometimes the characters would use nicknames for each other, but that would come after the audience is already well aware of the characters' full names. Meanwhile, we start the movie just hearing the characters' nicknames, which yes, narratively it makes sense for them to refer to each other by nicknames if they knew each other for a long time, but also, you gotta introduce them to the audience, otherwise they're just gonna think that, oh yeah, this pony's name is Sunny, this one is Hitch, this one is Zipp, and this one is Pipp. I didn't even know Pipp had a last name. I thought her name was just Pipp, Princess Pipp. I don't know. I think the character branding here for G5 really needs work and is vastly inferior to G4 and arguably all of the other generations of ponies. But anyway, my plan for Zipp was actually to keep her coat as is because I personally really like her white coat in contrast to her colorful hair and wings. But putting her next to the other designs, she kind of looked unfinished. Then I thought she'd look pretty cute with a gray dappled pattern, and because I figured there's no harm in trying it, I decided to give it a go. Luckily, Clip Studio Paint has a special dappled light brush that I will be using exactly for this, and I really like how it turned out. It made Zipp look like a stormy cloud, and I think it fits her thunderbolt-shaped cutie mark and aesthetic perfectly. But let me know what you think. Now last but not least, we have Pipp Petals, whose last name I just learned recently. Now, when we first got introduced to Pipp, I was so sure that she was going to be an antagonistic character because the vain, popular, girly types always get portrayed as the villains in kids' media targeted to girls for some reason. So I was really pleased to see her become part of the main protagonist and turn out to be a really sweet person. I was convinced that she would have been my favorite character in G5 overall because, first of all, she's pink. Second of all, she's a pop star. And third of all, she's got fluffy angel wings and is styled after flapper fashion. And extra fourth point, apparently she was also intended to be smaller and rounder than the other ponies in the main cast, which you can kind of see, but I definitely didn't notice it myself until the designs for Tell Your Tale came out, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, she also has my biggest pet peeve in character tropes, and that's the phone-obsessed influencer that's usually some boomer's interpretation of what the current generation is like. I just find it really annoying when shows constantly have these characters taking pictures of everything, posting it right away, and then saying out loud what they're writing in the description, including the hashtags. That genuinely grinds my gears. I also don't like it when they use trendy words and slang that they think kids say to make themselves seem hip and down with the times, when really what they're doing is dating themselves and showing just how out of touch they are. It always feels fabricated and uncanny and insincere and vaguely bad faith, but maybe that's just me. But design-wise, I literally have no complaints about Pipp, other than the fact that their 2D designs look entirely too uncanny, but that's not a Pipp-specific criticism. And as I've said before, because she's Zipp's sister, I will also be basing her off of Arabian horses, but with a rounder body and shorter legs than her sister to keep the spirit of her original design, which still works perfectly with the breed because, as the entry for Arabian horses states, they tend to lean smaller than they do bigger. So Zipp is actually the anomaly here. I know her fluffy wings are controversial to some people, but I think it's a really nice contrast against Zipp's sleek, streamlined wings and design overall. The two sisters are actually complete opposites of each other, not just in personality, but shape philosophy as well. Zipp is very sharp and sleek, whereas Pipp is round and soft, and I really like that. But I just wish their 2D appearances didn't look like this. So I'll mostly be keeping her design as is, aside from changing the art style. While drawing Pipp's wings, I wanted to make sure that I captured the soft, fluffy, rounded feel of them as per her original design, and to better contrast Zipp's wings. I also noticed that in their 3D character models, Pipp's wings are actually smaller than Zipp's as well, which I thought was really cute because they remind me of little cherub wings. Pipp in general kind of reminds me of a cherub, to be honest. And that's part of the reason why I like her design so much. So it makes sense to me that with the bigger wings and more aerodynamic body, Zipp would be the stronger flyer between the two. So while I posed Zipp with her wings completely unfurled and airborne, I'm going to have Pipp on the ground with her wings half furled. And it took a while for me to get it right because I kept accidentally making them too big or not fluffy enough. The fact that it was half furled also didn't help, but you know what? I was determined to make it work, and I think I managed to come up with something I was pretty happy with. For some reason though, I feel like the tighter no-show mane actually works better on Pipp. I don't mind it as much as I did on Zipp. I think it's because Pipp's design balances it out by having longer forelocks that hang over her face. It also helps that it's clearly inspired by old school 1920s hairstyles, so it's familiar looking enough that my brain is okay with it. Plus it makes me think of the cat ladies of Lackadaisy, and anything that makes me think of Lackadaisy is always a good thing. I also noticed that her headband is actually her princess crown. She just wears it off-center with the gem and petals being on the side of her head instead of the front like crowns would typically look, and in doing so makes it look like a flapper headband, which I think was very clever. See, these things are one of the reasons why I love Pipp. For her tail, I'm giving her that Arabian high tail carriage, which ends up getting blocked by her wings, unfortunately. But aside from that, I replicated the curled texture of her mane, and that's pretty much it. But recently, I feel like I've come to a crossroads for my redesigns. There are two wolves inside of me. No, but seriously, when I do redesigns for a specific show or media, part of me wants to try to replicate the art style as best as possible so that it would fit in seamlessly into the world of said media. I also like giving tips on how to replicate these art styles so that your OCs would fit in better with the media's art style. And that's great, right? The redesigns look like they'd fit in perfectly and I can give helpful art tips in one go. But doing that means my Instagram page looks like this, where it's a hodgepodge of different art styles and makes it look like, well, I have no art style. And sometimes I feel like I kind of don't, because I'm always drawing in other people's art styles and I don't get to develop my own or completely forget what I was doing before. So the other part of me just wants to use my own art style regardless of the fandom. It means my redesigns won't look like they belong to the media they're supposed to be from, and they probably won't look coherent to the rest of said media, but they'll look mine. And as an artist who is also a social media personality, maybe that's arguably more important. Because you're going to be hired for your art style and vision, right? So your art style becomes your brand, so you'd want it to be recognizable and distinct. Maybe my issue is that I'm trying too hard to be a fandom artist who replicates styles when I should be transforming characters from different fandoms to my style. Just some things for me to consider, I guess, but feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, because I did a bit of dabbling on Zipp's coat, of course I had to do it for Pipp as well. And again, I was very pleased with how it turned out because it made her look a bit like cotton candy. So here is my fully redesigned cast of My Little Pony Generation 5. I'm really happy with how they turned out. I think they look sufficiently like horses while still fitting in with the older MLP lines and adhering to modern design sensibilities. See, I can't even say that I drew them in my style because this isn't really my style. It's just a style I came up with for this video. Thank you so much for hanging out in my channel for a while. I hope your skin didn't get too pruny. Big shout out to my lovely pond dwellers on Patreon. If you want to become a pond dweller and get early access to my content, join my Patreon. If you want to see more from me, then please follow me on all my social media. If you want to submit fan art or chat with me, join my Discord server. And if you want more of my stories, check out my Wild Words series here on YouTube because that will make me really happy. All the links are in my description and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!